Hello and welcome back once again to Indaba Africa. For this video, I'd like to talk a little bit about the impacts financially for Nigeria, particularly when it comes to oil, and for Angola, two countries who are major oil producers, and they will be greatly impacted by the global shutdown that's currently taking place as authorities around the planet attempt to force social distancing and allow the virus to burn out rather than continue to propagate through the human species. So with that in mind, let's talk about Nigeria and Algeria, neither of whom are in the world's top 10 petroleum producers. Nigeria, which had long been a major oil producer, still produces a fair amount of petroleum, but is not even in the top 10 at this stage. The world's largest petroleum producer, of course, is the United States, with nearly 20 million barrels per day being produced before the Wuhan coronavirus, or COVID-19 by its scientific name, hit the planet. Before this pandemic spread around the world, we were producing nearly 20 million barrels of oil per day. It's about 85% more than Saudi Arabia, the second largest producer, or Russia, which is just behind them. So with Nigeria produced in 2019 an average of 2 million barrels of oil per day, and Angola produced an average of 1.5 million barrels per day. Now, oil is not oil in the market. There's a difference in oil. For instance, Nigerian crude, or Bonny Light being the benchmark for Nigerian crude, sells at a higher value than, for instance, most of the petroleum that comes out of Angola, which is lower, inferior quality, and usually sells for $10 to $12 a barrel less on the spot market. But let's go back to February 20th. Already in the midst of the pandemic, Chinese authorities still not being forthcoming about information, the World Health Organization colluding with them in giving people the impression that this was not quite as serious as it has become. At that stage, on February 20th, the price of Bonny Light crude was still $62.64 a barrel. Nigerian oil was making a fair amount of money at that price. But very quickly after that, the price of petroleum cratered, and we're now looking at an average of about $25 a barrel. That's less than half what it was trading for just a little over a month ago. Now, what's the impact of this? Well, for Nigeria, which produces 2 million barrels of oil per day, petroleum represents 76% of its export earnings. Nigeria in 2019 made $46 billion plus off of exports. 76% of that, or over $34 billion, came from petroleum. If you cut that in more than half, that's going to be a significant loss to the economy. Just this week, Nigerian authorities approached international lenders and asked for $6.9 billion to help with the effects of COVID-19. The $6.9 billion loans that they'll get from the IMF and other bodies is not going to be near enough to make up the shortfall in the loss of revenue from petroleum. Similar situation in Angola, which is even more dependent on petroleum. Angola's petroleum accounts for 88% of its export earnings. Angola, 1.5 million barrels per day. That's a pretty significant drop in earnings. Both of these countries not only have to confront the public health crisis, but they're going to have to do so with dramatically lower revenue. And we're not even talking about the impacts economically across the board that most countries will have to deal with. We're talking specifically about the loss of revenue from petroleum alone. Now, will the price of petroleum rebound? Perhaps. It is likely to rebound, but certainly not in the short term. So this will be very painful. And not only if the price were to rebound, what is the situation with demand? Global economic activity is not at a standstill, but is dramatically lower than it was. Countries that were once vulnerable to petroleum imports, like the United States, are no longer vulnerable to them and no longer rely on them. We used to get a fair number of barrels of oil from Nigeria every single day here in the United States. We no longer import oil from Nigeria for the most part. We are the world's largest producer of petroleum and therefore have little need for Nigerian petroleum. That already hurt Nigeria's economy with the lower demand from the United States. And so now what happens as global demand remains low and the prices remain low? This is a double whammy for Nigeria. Not only does it not make money, but the ripple effects of this for Nigeria and Angola across their economic sector coming out from the coronavirus impacts could be quite devastating. Once again, Nigeria, 2 million barrels of oil per day production, Angola 1.5 million. Between the two of them, they will at the moment lose about 60% of the revenue they were projecting from oil sales this year. So there you have it, folks. This pandemic is much larger than a public health crisis. It is an economic crisis, and not simply one because governments are shutting things down, but demand is down for commodities and for energy commodities in particular. What happens going forward? That's a tough question. But certainly the world needs to rise out of this COVID-19 disaster as quickly as possible. The downstream impacts on lower income, lower tax revenue, lower royalties from petroleum in both Angola and Nigeria is something that hits average Nigerians and average Angolans. It'll hit the poor the most as governments, both countries, find themselves unable to provide the resources to help the most vulnerable. So if you like the content, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. And if you like this video, I ask that you push that button right there and give us a like. Likes drive traffic to the channel, and we get to share these ideas with others. And I'd like to keep people thinking about the continent of Africa. I don't want Africa to be forgotten about in the midst of Wuhan coronavirus, COVID-19. Africa matters. And for those who don't realize that, they will eventually get there. With that, folks, I thank you for your time. Take care. We're all going to get through this together.